I'm here. I'm Emilio Chavez, and I'm here with Bonnie Alvarado. And we're just gonna talk a little bit about her experience in Salinas and how it was like during the war years. So, we'll start with your family. Can you talk a little bit about your family history, like why they came to Salinas?
Well, I was very small. I was born in Loveland, Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
and they waited for me to be born to come to California. And what was happening in the Midwest is what they called the Dust Bowl. And the whole Midwest was going through like a 7 year drought. And when the winds blew, the dust got so bad that people were choking to death and animals were dying. And all the farmers that lived there for years and years and years, there was no water, there was no crop. The people would wake up and their house would be full of sand from the wind, and they would, I mean, there was no work. And my father and mother, there was four of us. I had two brothers, a sister, and then I was born in Loveland. And my grandmother lived in Salinas, and she had 10 kids, and
Mm-hmm.
they all lived back in Nebraska and Loveland. And she said, come to California, there's work here. So my mom and dad decided they were going to have to leave Colorado. And they waited for me to be born, and I was born in September. And then first part of the year, they started out for California. And somebody gave my father a car, and it was
Mm-hmm.
a old car already. And he worked on it, and he took the seat out of the back of the car, and all the neighbors gave my mom and dad food, and they created probably the first station wagon. They put all the
Wow.
food under where the seat was, and then they put a mattress on top, and all of us kids sat on the mattress in the back. And as we were leaving, my grandfather stood there and he was crying because his daughter was leaving with all her children. And my dad said, oh, hell, come on. So my grandfather ran in and got a suitcase. And all of our suitcases were, what we had was tied on the top
Mm-hmm.
of our car, and all the food that we were going to eat. And I think they probably had $5 or $6.
Wow.
And they headed to California. And along the way, it took them about 6 weeks to get here. What we could probably do in 2 days, maybe. If you drove all the way, you could probably do it in one swoop.
Right.
But they went Highway 66, and that's what most people were traveling. And it was a terrible road. It was, a lot of it wasn't even paved. And they would stop along the way and cook, make a fire and cook, or take a break. Or my dad would stop if we ran out of money, and he would find a job, a mechanic or something, and make a few dollars and to feed us, and then we would be on our way. But a lot of people took longer than that. I have friends that it took them 3 months to get here from Texas.
Wow.
But a lot of places there didn't have gas. People were pushing their cars. There were no hotels, there were no restaurants. So everybody was just camping on the side of the road, and it was accepted. So
Mm-hmm.
we got here, and what we didn't realize is that other his other brothers were coming also. And when we got here, my grandmother lived in a little tiny 2 bedroom house out in Alisal. That was, my house is small, but it was really small. It was 1 bathroom, 2 bedroom, maybe 600 square feet, and 16 of us lived in that. And we lived there about a year. And the adults all slept in the car, and so the kids could sleep in the house. And then the adults started getting jobs. And my mother, and her first job was a waitress, and my dad was a dishwasher.
Wow. And what kind of jobs, going back to when you guys were coming over here, what kind of jobs did your dad find when,
They
the
would
odd
wash
jobs?
dishes. They would do yard work. My dad was a mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
Cars were very simple then, and he could work on a car. And he would do anything. If he stopped at a farmhouse and the lady was willing to let him do work in her garden or her yard or paint, he would do anything if she would feed us or and give him a couple of dollars. But you realize then gas was 13 cents a gallon and nobody had any money. This was also right after the Great Depression, after, you know, right as the whole economy of the United States collapsed about that time too, just before. And I was born in 39, so my parents came here in 40, and just about the time of the war. So my grandmother lived out in the east side, which they call the east side now, which was East Salinas. But most of the people of my family got jobs in produce. They worked in the fields or they worked in the sheds, and that was the main job.
And you said that all you guys lived in one house.
One house.
16,
16 people.
16 people. How many? 600 square feet, right? You guys
Very
had,
tiny.
And how did that work for you guys?
I know people slept in shifts because if you were working, then somebody else could sleep. And you know, and my grandparents, they did the best they could, you know. We didn't know everybody was going to show up at once. And we had my grandfather with us too. So he got a job. And then as soon as we could save some money, our first house was a converted chicken coop. And it was in East Salinas, and everybody was coming here during the Dust Bowl. People from Oklahoma, Alabama, Colorado, all those states were being affected by the Dust Bowl. And so all those people were just coming in mass. And John Steinbeck wrote about Grapes of Wrath and how poorly people were treated, and how poorly people were paid. And everybody was coming. They would actually send flyers to the Midwest, say, come, we have jobs. And then people got here and they didn't have jobs. Too many people showed up at once.
So then they were probably expecting less people, or that might have been...
I don't think they really knew, but once they took advantage of so many people wanting the same jobs, they could treat them poorly, not pay them hardly anything. And John Steinbeck wrote more about the San Joaquin Valley than about our Salinas Valley. But the people in Salinas did not like John Steinbeck's book, even though he was born here, because they felt like he misrepresented how people treated us, and but a lot of it was very true. And if you've ever seen the pictures of the Dust Bowl and how people lived in labor camps in tents, and when we got here, there was not enough housing, and some of the prominent people, like Jim Gaddis, who is a big property owner in Salinas, and the Applings, who own the Appling Inn, and the Appling, they own the Toyota. These are all these are all the Okies that stayed here. And they slept in tents out by the Salinas River. So if you know where the Salinas River is, that was Tent City. That was all the Okies. And if you know where the swimming pool is, there was another tent city there along Carr Lake. So there was no place to stay. There was no apartments.
And so there were no apartments at all. Even if people were able to afford them, they didn't exist.
Didn't. And what had happened is Mr. Burke, who was an entrepreneur from Oklahoma, he came out and started building Little Oklahoma in Salinas. And that's what my grandmother had, is one of Mr. Burke's house. He built like 600 square foot, just the exterior. And then each person, it was up to you. You could buy one for $300 or $400 on a piece of property. There was no plumbing. There was all septic tanks, and there was no electrical. It was, it was there were no streets, sidewalks. It was very primitive when Alisal first started.
So it was just an empty piece of land.
Yeah. And that my friend owned property on the corner of Del Monte and Williams Road, and that's where the Alisal Elementary School was built. And her father had a chicken ranch there, and he sold the property to Alisal Elementary School District, and they built a school on his chicken ranch. So life has changed a lot. I'm 74, so in 74 years, it went from chicken coops and no sewers, and when we came, there was no water system. So I have a friend, same lady that had the ranch. Her parents started the water company because we only had wells, and so it's like building from the ground up.
Exactly. So then each neighborhood or each family had their own well? How did
Each family had their
family?
own septic tank, but
Uh-huh.
if you had a well, maybe two or three families
Because
used.
that's really expensive.
Well, you had to dig a well. So the man who had the best, people started asking him, "Can we get water from your well?" And as people came, he realized he needed to put lines in. And she said that they used to put lanterns, gas lanterns, along the street so people would know where the water lines were. So I mean, it was all primitive. There was no PG&E digging lines or anything. So when they first started, her brother and dad and them, they would dig the line and lay the water line to your house, and you would buy water from them. And then they just expanded as the demand came, and they developed the Alcoa Water Company. So all of these Okies
Basically.
that came here, the one man, Bill Ramsey, he owns Man Packing, which is a huge company in Salinas, and he came from Texas with 8 of his siblings. And it took them months. They pushed their car because there was no gas.
Right.
And they weren't from the Dust Bowl, they came because of the stock market. His father lost everything when the stock market crashed. So,
Yeah. And what do you remember most when you were young, growing up?
how simple life was. I think that when you think back, my mom and dad bought a very small 2-bedroom house, and there were 10 of us. By then, my brother was born, and my uncle had rode the railroad trains. He was a hobo. He went when we all got here. He wanted to come, and he got caught trains and came here. And we had a nephew living with us, so there was 10 of us. And my mom and dad bought a very small house for $500, and my dad built a 2-story and made it bigger. And our neighbors were all Okies. I mean, we were all from Oklahoma, Alabama, Colorado, but as far as everybody was concerned, we were all Okies.
Yeah.
Even though I'm from Colorado, I was always considered an Okie. And it was okay. We were all poor. Everybody helped each other. You didn't have to have a building permit. And when you wanted to build on, you just built on. And we lived 1 block from my grandmother, and my uncle lived another block, and another uncle. All of us kind of stayed together, kind of like the Mexicans are doing now. They're all in the Alisal, and they took over Little Oklahoma. Now it's Little Mexico. It's just a different culture.
It's different
Yeah.
cultures. They, move there and everything changes, right?
But when I lived there, you could play outside in the street and play baseball, kick the can. You could run up and down the street. Kids were out till it was dark. Nobody shot each other. Nobody fought each other. And if my neighbor down the street told me to behave, I listened. I respected them. We were in each other's homes. We had coffee in our neighbors' homes every week. The women would get together and have coffee. So we knew all our neighbors. If one needed help, my mom had voting in the house. We had Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, and I mean, it was just different. I do not see any of that neighborhood feeling anywhere. I don't know. I know maybe one or two neighborhoods that I've been in that where the neighbors really support each other and help each other. And you don't see people outside. I mean, we used to be
Right.
outside. Nobody's outside anymore. I would no more let my kids play out here, and people are fearful.
Mm-hmm.
It's just become very different, very different. It was very simple, what I remember. And
You used to play with your siblings.
oh yeah, yeah, and the neighbors, and I could go down my street today. I mean, I go back and look at my house every once in a while, and I could say, oh, the Hollenbecks lived there, and the Goins boys lived there, and the Ramseys lived there. I could tell you every house that all my friends lived in. And one lady still lives out there that lived across the street from me, Frances Lewis. She still lives out there. So I still go out in the neighborhood. I loved Alisal. It was a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful place to grow up. But by the time we got, I mean, when we went to grade school, it was all Okies. It was all very poor people. If you had a pair of shoes, you were very lucky.
So then, would you say that you would be in school? Was it different? Like you, like all the Okies, were they like by other kids? Were they teased?
Well, we didn't go uptown. At one time, when my parents first came, the police used to sit at the railroad track. The police cars would sit there to discourage the Okies from coming into town,
Oh, wow.
into downtown Salinas. People didn't want the Okies. And you get the same feeling about the Mexican people now. You know, there's a big discrimination. And I'm married to a Mexican. My girls are all married to Mexicans. But there was definitely not, the Okies were not welcome. We kept to ourselves. And as long as you were at Alisal Elementary School, everybody was the same. Everybody at Fremont School and Sanborn School, all the schools, they were all just filled with little Okie kids. The kids nowadays, you know, they have to have this clothes and that clothes and shoes, and we just didn't. We didn't have a lot of stuff. And our meals were one pot. We either had a pot of beans and cornbread, or chicken soup, or spaghetti. We didn't have meat. We didn't barbecue steaks and chicken, and we didn't. Nobody did.
Nobody did.
The big thing was fried chicken on Sunday. Mashed potatoes, fried chicken, potato salad. But nobody was buying steaks. But nobody else was either. So, and we made our own ice cream, and it was just a wonderful place to grow up.
So as a child, you were very
We were isolated
but at
and
the same time, you were very
happy.
happy.
And all of my cousins were the same because they all lived out in the Alisal, same place we did. My only uncle, two of my uncles became chiropractors and moved to Merced and joined the Elks, and and they were so different from the rest of us. They had to have the formals and the tuxedos, and it was very strange to us. They were very, very different. They were professionals. But we found once we hit junior high, we were still isolated because we were still out on the east side. We were still in Alisal. The rude awakening was when we went to high school. And when we went to high school, all the kids that lived uptown that had the nice clothes, that had the more professional parents, we just kind of clashed. We stayed separate. The Okie kids kind of hung together, and the uptown kids hung out together, and that's how it was.
It was just normal.
And
Right.
if you look at the yearbook, the uptown kids are the ones that were the officers, that were in the camera club, that ran the school, that were the cheerleaders. They were all the kids that lived uptown.
And very few of you participated in
Right.
those activities.
Right. And what we found also was the uptown kids, their plan was to go on to college. We didn't have that mentality. Not a lot of my friends or the Okies set out for college. Very few had that goal. What we ended up doing is we got married and started our family and got jobs. And I graduated in June and got married in October.
So it was sort of like a cycle.
Yep.
It was sort of like a cycle.
And that was okay because that's all we knew. So all of my friends were doing the same thing. All of us were getting married when we were 17 and 18 years old. Mm-hmm. And by the time I was 20, I had a baby and all my girlfriends had babies. So it's okay. And we still stayed with our same friends.
So, education-wise, when you were growing up, did you ever aspire to go to college or
No.
a profession pursued?
Never occurred to me to be a nurse or a teacher or I didn't set the goals. My goal was to graduate from high school and then go to work. And I worked when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. All of us had jobs. I worked for the school system in the attendance office half a day my senior year, so I only went to school half a day my senior year. All that was required was math, and PE was always required, and then in summer school you would take history or government and get those out of the way. But those are the requirements. It wasn't, the education system really sucked. I mean, I don't know. A lot of like I said, a lot of the people that left here and went to college, they never came back. Mm-hmm. And all of us from Alisal that got married and started families, we stayed. So that's why a lot of the prominent people in Salinas today are Okies. The Jim Gattises, the Applings, the Church family, these were all Okies that came here and stayed.
They stayed.
And when I do class reunions, we've been out of school 55 years, I still see when we get together, my friends are still the ones that grew up on the east side. And I see the other people kind of congregate with their friends, which were the uptown kids.
So there's still
A division.
Groups, right?
Yep. And you can see it. They're more reserved and we're more outgoing and more relaxed. I don't know. I don't know, it's because they were professional people and don't know how to, I don't know, relax or what. But I still see it when we go to class reunions. So. But I still have made lots of friends with people that were the uptown. Now, because my husband went to college. He went to Hartnell for a while. And he joined Pi Delta Kappa, which is a fraternity. And those were the Jim Gattis, Jim Shade, the people that were going to become the backbone of Salinas. That was part of his fraternity. So we became very involved in that and joined the Elks and stuff. So we've kind of broken out of the stigmatism that we're not good enough.
Right. Yeah.
And that was the stigmatism, that you weren't good enough.
Unfortunately,
yep.
Right. Yeah. And so then, in terms of education, again, your family never encouraged you or anyone. Was it something that was never mentioned?
It wasn't even a given. My oldest brother graduated from high school and went right to work. My sister graduated from high school, went to work for the phone company. None of us went to college. None of us. My brother joined the Navy Army when he was 16. And I got married, and I was working in high school, and as soon as I got out of high school, I was working for Bank of America.
Oh, wow.
And it never occurred to me that I should go to college. I was already getting married, and my friends were all getting married, and one or two of my friends went to school and became airline stewardess, and I thought, wow, that's awesome. You know, that she stepped out of the box and did something different. But even as young married people, we continued the same cycle. We still stayed together, went to each other's children's birthday parties. You know, we had New Year's parties, Christmas parties, and it seemed to be a lot of the same people that we went to high school with.
So very few people, you would say, sort of stepped out of the box,
Right.
did something different.
Yeah,
Right.
because I don't think Bill Ramsey, I don't think he went to college. I don't think Jim Gaddis went to, these are people that are still in Salinas. Sue Appling didn't go to college. She owns the Toyota company here. These are people that stayed. The people that own Granite Construction, the Wilkersons, they were friends of ours. They sold their company for $5 million. And he was an Okie from Muskogee. I mean, he was more Okie than me. And they were just hardworking people who created businesses that grew. And they didn't go to college.
Yeah, and somehow helped Salinas.
Yeah.
What it is today.
Today,
Right.
still, and their families continue because Don Nucci's family was also very strong in this town. And you were asking me how it was when I came here during the war and stuff. And one of my dad's first jobs was he was a dishwasher, and then he got a job loading lettuce into what they would do is all the lettuce would come to a shed, and all the lettuce would be packed in cartons, and then it would go down a conveyor belt. And my dad would pick up these cartons of lettuce and throw them into box cars on the train. And then they would have huge chunks of ice and blow ice into the boxcars, and that's how they shipped shipped lettuce before they learned how to vacuum cool. And during the war, my dad had been drafted, and he was going to go into the Army. And Don Nucci's father, Mr. Nucci, owned the packing company, and he went to the board, what do they call it? Where your the draft board, and he told him, I really need Keith Wright to work for me. He's one of my best workers, and what I do during the war is provide food, and I need him. So the draft board deferred my father to not go into the Army, which was wonderful because my dad didn't have to leave, and he had a big family to raise.
Right, and you guys obviously didn't want him to leave, right?
Right. During the war,
really
no.
hard
Yeah.
for your family. Yeah.
And my mother went to school and became a nurse. So, I mean, she wasn't well educated, but that it never occurred to me to go to college to become a nurse.
And your mother went to school in
Hartnell. They had a
Hartnell.
nursing program at Hartnell, and she went there and had 5 kids at home.
Where did she work here in Salinas?
When she worked at Natividad for 27 years.
Wow.
So she was a nurse at Natividad, and my sister got tuberculosis, which is a disease of the lungs, and at that time they put you in the hospital. And so my sister was in the hospital at Natividad for a year because that's what they did. They thought if you were around people with TB, you caught it, so they would isolate you. And so my mom luckily worked there while my sister was in the hospital. But it was amazing. She had 5 kids. Her brother and her father lived with her. She went to school, became a nurse. She cooked for this huge family, and none of these prepared meals. Everything was from scratch. And she was a Girl Scout leader, a PTA member, and she did it all. She amazed me.
She's really involved.
Yeah, she'd go to work at 7, get off at 3, and she could do it all. The Okies were hardworking people. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a shame. Well, it's just different. Kids today don't know how to work. They don't. We're all computer. But I don't think my grandsons know how to mow a lawn. I don't. D- they live in Pacific Grove and there's no lawn, so they've never mowed a lawn. They got a little tiny yard in Pacific Grove. It never occurred to them to come over here and mow a lawn or edge. I don't think most males know how to change a light bulb nowadays. They don't. You can't work on a car. And the Okies did all their own repair work. They fixed their cars, and we've become a society where everything's hired.
Right.
People have somebody to clean their house. They have somebody to wash their car. I don't see my grandson washing their truck. Everybody, you go through the car wash. So what? They go to the gym to work out. Get out and do yard work. I mean, what do you? I know people who work in the fields that still pick strawberries. Some of the girls at Everett Alvarez, but really, the youth today, I don't think. Could you paint a room? Could you?
Different lives, the different eras, right?
Yep,
Everything, things change, right?
they do, and they've changed tremendously.
Drastically.
I mean, my dad built rentals on Del Monte. Right now, there's shootings on Del Monte, but when my husband and I got married in '57, my father rented a house for $50, an apartment, and because we were family, he rented it to us for $22.50. So that's what me and my husband paid for rent our first 3 years we were married. And we saved money and bought a house. And our first house was $12,000. And we put it on a 30-year loan. So our payments were $100 a month. And we wondered how we were going to make $100 a month house payment. Because I worked at the bank 2 weeks and brought home $92. I worked 2 40-hour weeks, 80 hours, and brought home $94. So that tells you what apples and oranges. $12,000 for a house was a big commitment. So $22.50 rent. Life changes rapidly. Now your cell phone bill's $150. Yeah,
Definitely.
definitely different. But because he had the rentals, I learned to paint. We have rentals now. We go in, we do our own painting, we do our own yard work, we can do most of our repairs. People can't do it anymore. They just don't. You expect somebody else to do everything. You have somebody come in and clean your carpets.
Right.
Yep.
It's just more common, and people just think it's easier.
Yep.
Right. That's why it's
So life changes
time.
quickly.
No, I don't have time.
Yeah. But I don't know. I loved living in Salinas. It's been a wonderful place to grow up. And I know a lot of people feel very threatened in Salinas. They don't feel comfortable being here. Friends that don't live here wonder why we're still here, because we have such a bad reputation.
Right. And you said that you married your husband when you were
17.
17. How was that like?
I was in junior high when I met my husband. So I was 13 or 14 years old. And all of my girlfriends we had one high school, Salinas High. And so more than likely you met the man you were going to marry at Salinas or Salinas High, unless you went off to college. And so we dated and the high school years, and then got serious the senior year. But my dad didn't like him. He was Mexican, and he was a Catholic. And my dad was not a religious man, but he did not like, although he would play pool with my husband at the pool hall downtown, he didn't want me dating him or marrying him.
So then there were some differences then, difficulties you encountered, right?
Right.
Your family wasn't accepting then.
Well, there weren't a lot of Mexican people in Salinas at that time. And we were mostly Caucasians. We were mostly Okies in Alisal. A few Mexican families had moved in. But, I didn't see a big division. I had other Mexican friends that I didn't feel different from. So, after we'd been married 30 or 40 years, we finally convinced my dad that we were going to make it. But yeah. And his sister was not real pleased, and she tried to tell. It was very difficult because she was a strong Catholic, and so was his mother. He wasn't, but they thought that we should raise our children Catholic. But since I'm the stronger person in our family, and I'm more religious and I'm Baptist, then I raised my kids as Baptist. And that was fine with my husband. It was outside his family that had strong feelings.
Right, because I mean, you had your, well, everybody has their own ways of raising their kids, right? So you chose to raise them Baptist.
Baptist. And I don't believe in spanking, and I didn't spank my kids, and my family didn't spank me. But his family believed in whipping, and what I call beating, and I didn't. So we had a difference there. They felt like, spare the rod, spoil the child. And I figure you don't have to beat people to control them. So we had issues there. But my 3 daughters have grown up to be beautiful women and really, really strong. And by the time my children started school, by then Alisal had become more and more Mexican people. I'm already in Alvarado, living next to a Mexican family, and Alisal High had been built, and that was a lot of Mexican people going there because the Mexican people were moving into Alisal because we have cheaper homes. Mm-hmm. And my girls all met Mexican boys, and they all married Mexican boys. I'm the last Okie in the family, pure-blooded Okie. So
then your 3 daughters.
All 3 daughters married Mexican boys. My oldest daughter married David Flores, so she's a florist. My middle daughter married Gilbert Ruiz, and all 4 of them went to Alisal High and graduated from Alisal High, which is on the east side, because I never left Alisal, because I loved it. I loved Alisal. And my youngest daughter, she went to North High, but she met a Mexican boy when she started working at Household, and she's Villarreal. So I have Alvarado, Flores, Ruiz, Villarreal. So we all married Mexican boys. So it's okay. We just changed the dynamic of my family because most of my cousins and stuff were married Okies.
Right.
So, and most of my friends are Okies.
It was probably hard to break out of that cycle, right?
So when we have a potluck, they used to, and Matt joined the Elks and stuff, and they go, if we had a Mexican thing, what are you bringing? I'm bringing Matt, So, I mean, he's adjusted. We still have a lot of, I'm very, very good friends with his sister and all of his nieces and nephews, but it's just different. So we're comfortable, and we're not conflict. I hate conflict, so
Right.
just go with the flow.
Better with no conflict, right?
Yeah, no conflict, please. So, no, it's a good town to grow up in, I think, even though a lot of people are fearful. But you asked me earlier, during the war, what do I remember too? And I remember incidents where people told me they had blackouts. Families were very worried about the Japanese coming and bombing because we had Fort Ord here, which was a military base, and we were right on the coast, and people were really very serious that we might be bombed. And so you had to have blackouts. You had to have your windows covered so no light could get out. And I don't know what they did as far as the street lights and stuff, but even families that I know that lived in Marysville and stuff that lived in tents, they had a big black cover, like a tarp, that they would put over their tent. They wanted no light. They thought if we were bombed and the Japanese could see lights, that's where they're going to bomb. So you wanted to make sure you had blackout.
Blackout. And when did you guys know?
I personally didn't because I was too young during the war, but I would say that, in the 40s.
But like when you guys had to cover your windows,
I don't know. I
you
would
don't know.
assume that there would be a siren.
A siren.
Yeah. We were a very small town, remember? We were a town of 30,000, something like that. But even the bigger towns all along the coast, anywhere where they thought the Japanese, like they went into Pearl Harbor, they were afraid they were going to come here and bomb, mainly because we had Fort Ord.
So
But
it sounds like people lived in fear,
they did,
right?
yeah, during the war, and people were fearful. There was one lady that lived in Monterey that swore she saw that she looked out and saw a submarine in the Monterey harbor, and she made her husband move her and her whole family back to the Midwest. She was so afraid. So I was just too young. What was the war over in 45?
Yeah.
Where's our history buff? I don't know. But I was too young. And then when you're a kid, you're kind of oblivious
Right.
to all that. You're not reading the paper and you're not worrying about somebody bombing and, So that was just stories that I was told.
Yeah, while growing up, I assume that you just grew up as a kid. You were a kid. You
Yeah,
didn't
we were
know.
oblivious to it.
Right.
We were in our own little world.
You weren't afraid of bombs or anything, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in TV, right? There was no.
But I see the kids today, like my grandchildren, they're very aware of the shootings, and they've now moved back by Chicago, and they're much happier back there. They're not dealing with shootings every day. They lived right here in Salinas, and after witnessing somebody being shot, they didn't just go outside and play. Usually if they were outside, one of the parents was out there watching them.
Supervising them.
Yep, they had to be supervised. So, and I think that's the mentality. The young Mexican boy walking to school is a target. I mean, if somebody's out there that wants to do harm to him, and it has happened to boys walking to Alvarez, boys walking to Alisal, and you have to know. I had my grandsons visit here from Pacific Grove, and I wouldn't let them walk to the mall. They're nice, tall Mexican boys. Somebody would have to drive up next to them and say, "Who are you affiliated with?" Which means, what gang do you belong to? And it is fearful, I think, for these young boys.
Yeah.
So,
It is very hard. And so then, would you still say that the most significant changes to Salinas, the violence?
I see over the years, we're talking the 50s, 60s, 70s. I've seen in the last maybe, 20 years, it's been getting worse and worse and worse. And I think a lot of it is people that come here, and I'm from Mexico, that aren't coming here to be a family. They're coming here to be part of La Familia, which is people who rob, prostitution, drugs. They're not coming here and saying, "I'm going to go to Salinas where I'm going to have a better life and I'm going to bring my children and I'm going to work here and make a good life." These are people that they're not doing that. They're looking for an easy life, and that involves drugs, prostitution, robberies, killings. And most of these people that are doing the shootings belong to gangs. And it's not only Salinas, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. It's in Sacramento. If you want to go to Chinatown in San Francisco, if you really get involved, you'll find that there's gangs there that are very threatening. So it's everywhere where people are looking for an easy, they're not, I don't know, they're not trying to be a family and trying to be a part of the community and making the world a better place. They're very selfish, and but that's the big change I've seen in Salinas. But still, there's so many wonderful people that live here. And we're the majority. They're the minority. The trouble is they control so much and cause so much havoc. And they're the minority, the bad people. There's wonderful, wonderful people here that live here.
Would you say that the most significant change is the violence then? Or
Yes.
Yes.
And disrespect, people who disrespect other people's property. And I don't know. I belong luckily to a culture of Christian women, and it's totally different. I mean, we have no idea how some of these kids are raised and brought up. So we're kind of in a little bubble of, you know, I'm not affluent, but I'm not, you know, I'm very comfortable in my life financially and emotionally, and there's just a lot of problems going on in this world. But I'm lucky. It doesn't affect me personally. But I do see that there's people who do not want to come here and people who do not want to shop here. But you can't go back. You can't. And so you have to do something. I know that I went and we had a policeman talk to us, and, you know, they're dealing with a lack of police force. The police force is very short-handed, and they're driving outdated cars. And he said they didn't even have enough ammunition to practice. I mean, that's sad.
When was this?
2 months ago, we had the policeman come, and he was in charge of from 3 in the afternoon to 11 at night. He was the commander, and our police station is outdated, very outdated. We're short about 30 policemen, that we should have more. And if there's a shooting, it ties up so many of the police force. If something else happens, sometimes they can't even go to those calls. So, and I just did a tour of the fire station last week, and they're shorthanded, and it's funding. So they've retired people, and those jobs have not been filled. So
it's unfortunate because Salinas, I mean, the population is, you know,
to
growing.
become more involved or more informed, we've had a policeman come and talk to us. My Christian women's group, there's 50 of us. So we wanted to be more informed about the police, and we wanted to be more informed about the fire department.
So you're involved in the community a lot then?
Right. And I work with the library, and I've done a program. I had speakers and involvement with telling our story about the Dust Bowl and how all of us got here. And I reached out to people who actually were old enough to remember. They were like 9 or 10 when they got here. And I talked to one of the teachers. She's 94 years old. She was a teacher, a principal, and the superintendent of Alisal School for 35 years. And these were all people that were part of my program to try to explain how was Alisal formed? How did everybody get here? And it's called the Dust Bowl, and it's available at all libraries. And we're going to try to put it into book form. We're going to try to do the written word, because I went to the library to check out some of these people who were very prominent in Salinas were interviewed on tape, but it was those tapes, tape to tape. Okay. Yeah. And the library had them, and they didn't take care of them, and they all disintegrated. All this history that these ranchers and the Applings and the people actually told their story. And a friend of mine said, "Oh, my dad's story's down at the library." They taped him. So I went down and I said, I'd like to listen to the Appling. She said, "I hate to tell you, but all those tapes were damaged and they're gone. We've lost them all." So if we think we're so smart now with CDs, but are those chips forever? Are those memory chips that are they forever? I don't know. Are those CDs? Are those going to be lasting forever? I mean, we thought VHS was the new best
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
Can anybody have a VHS player anymore? So all the stuff that's on VHS could very probably be destroyed, or people won't have a VHS player. And so we're trying to do the written word. But if you go to the library today, people aren't checking out books. So I don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to try to do it. You're doing oral history.
Yes.
So you're not going to do written.
Well, it's both written and oral history.
So what we're doing today is going to be converted into writing.
No, it's not gonna be. It's not gonna be converted into writing. It's just the recording. So, but we'll talk about that. Yeah. So, do you have anything else to add?
Well, I think Salinas, there's so many people that really care about Salinas, and so many people that came here as the Dust Bowl. And if that's the history that you guys are trying, the CSUMB is trying to record, so you're interviewing people in my age bracket that actually experienced, I think you better hurry up. Because people, people are dying. I mean, I just got a call today that Warren Goldman died. He is very prominent in Salinas, and Jim Appling died a couple of years ago. He helped create so many businesses here, and when you look at Jim Gaddis is 75. My husband's going to be 80. I'm going to be 75 next year. If you guys don't hurry up and get the history, there's not going to be anybody left to tell it. And the ones that are here won't remember. So, I don't know. I think Salinas is still a wonderful town, even with the violence.
I think personally, input here. I think it is too.
I do. What I feel bad about is the parents are so few parents are getting involved with their children. My children are all involved in sports. All my son-in-laws coach. My son-in-law is the head coach at Pacific Grove High School. My other son-in-law is a coach for girls softball at Storm, right over here. My other son-in-law is a minister, and he's a coach. He coached for the Salinas Rec League. And none of these guys make any money. They do it because they love the kids. But it's the same people. The same people. My husband had a wrestling club for 50 years.
Oh, wow.
And he was inducted into the Wrestling Hall of Fame. Do you think he could find somebody that would take over and dedicate? He didn't have any wrestlers. He had 3 daughters. None of our daughters were wrestlers. He did it because he loved the sport, and he would go to the east side and pick up all these boys who had no transportation, no money, and he coached them for 50 years. He did this. You couldn't find anybody to take over. And he finally dissolved his wrestling club. If the parents don't start getting involved with the children, our society is going to be in big trouble. And you have to start when they're little. And when you have grandparents coaching Little League, and you have grandparents raising their grandchildren, even great-grandparents raising their great-grandchildren, what is wrong with this society that you don't have more participation with the youth. I don't know. And I think that's where we're gonna lose it if we don't spend more time with our young people and guide them.
Yeah, because well, it is a growing problem, right? It's been slowly.
I mean, when it's the same people all the time. And I know the Mexican women are not culturally raised. I saw my mother as a Girl Scout leader and PTA, so that's what I did. But you're not seeing the Mexican people from Mexico doing that, so their children aren't learning that. I mean, you don't, the only thing I really see is soccer. And that's to me not a, it's not football, it's soccer. And that's because in Salinas we're 75-80% Mexican and soccer is their sport. So you see huge participation there. But I think right now, if you want to make Salinas a better place, get involved with the youth. And you know that by meeting Ruth,
Oh yes.
who is 96,
I believe so.
95, 96 years
95,
old.
96 years old, somewhere around that.
And Ruth found me, and that's how I met you.
Right.
And Ruth is 90-something years old, still working with CSUMB.
That's awesome,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes. And it doesn't just happen. I would have never met you if a lady 90-something years old was not working with your professor to make this oral history work. She set up the rec center so you guys could see the first USO in Salinas. She set up the Baranda Adobe so you could go out and see the history of Salinas at the Adobe. She set up something else. Oh, the thing at the Steinbeck Center
Oh,
that
right.
Joanne did. And Ruth, 90-something years old. We need people like that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's hard to find somebody like that nowadays, right?
yeah. It is. So I don't know what else I can tell you. I was very young when I got here, and all of us were raised the same, and I guess that's our mentality. But we like being involved. I do. Right now, I collect clothes for homeless, and people bring stuff here, and then I have people that come by and get it, or I deliver it, and I don't know. I see a lot of people don't want to do the work that it takes to do that, or volunteer at the library, or volunteer at the school.
Right.
They quit having parties at the school. We used to, when we were in school, I don't know about you, but we had Halloween parties and Valentine's and Christmas, and they don't do that anymore. They don't have parents to help.
Yeah, because, well, there's obviously not going to be a lot of teachers, right? They're short, handed. So the only resource left are the parents. But, well, if you don't have the parents, it's rather hard.
And then
Right.
you have to be careful that the Kwanzaa people don't, or the people that don't believe in God, they don't want Christmas, and they don't want the flag, and they don't want you saluting the flag, or saying the
Yes.
Pledge of Allegiance, or mention the Bible, or... That's sad. And so it just takes one or two people, and now you can't stand up and pledge allegiance to the flag. I don't know. Our world's changing. I'm an old person, what can I say? So I don't know if there's anything else I can tell you. Do you think we covered?
I think we covered pretty much your how your family got here, your education, marriage, Salinas during World War II, and what you think of Salinas today. So I think we've covered everything, and I'd like to thank you for volunteering to record this, and it's very useful information that we're going to use.
Good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Anytime. So I'll let you work with us when we do oral history
Oh, that'll be
at
great.
the library. We'll get you guys involved when we want to do the written word.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
that'll be great.
I do like being involved, so anytime. I would like to recommend to your professor that she show my video.
Okay. Yes.
It's called The Dust Bowl, and it's available at the library. So,
Okay. Yes.
all right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks.